The heightened alert, or HA period, in Singapore's fight against the COVID-19 virus started on 8 May 2021 and lasted 3 months. During this period, the COVID-19 measures in Singapore changed frequently. It started with a reduction in group sizes from 8 to 5, and reductions in the allowed capacities of large events, brought about by increased amounts of locally transmitted cases, including a COVID-19 cluster at Tan Tock Seng Hospital. Though this initial part of the HA period was officially called Phase 3 Heightened Alert, it was in effect a return to the measures in Phase 2 of Singapore's phased reopening from the COVID-19 measures it had during its partial lockdown from April to June 2020, which it termed a circuit breaker. This was even alluded to by a minister in Singapore's multi-ministry task force, formed to coordinate government policy about the coronavirus, who had called the measures imposed as part of Phase 3 Heightened Alert a return to Phase 2. However, this tightening of measures was unable to sufficiently control the spread of the virus, and measures were tightened further for a period lasting from 16 May to 13 June 2021, in a period known as Phase 2 Heightened Alert. Group sizes were further reduced to 2, and dining in at food and beverage or F&B outlets was ceased. In addition, home-based learning was implemented for students, and most had to work from home, except for those working in essential sectors. The government also decided to expand its vaccination program to citizens between 40 and 44 years of age starting 19 May, and then further to citizens aged between 12 and 39 years old starting 11 June. By the 10th of June, the COVID-19 situation had improved. Hence, the government announced that Phase 2 Heightened Alert would end as scheduled, and a new phase of looser restrictions, known as Phase 3 Heightened Alert, would start from the 14th. Most notably, the maximum group size was increased back to 5, and the allowed capacity of large events was increased. Now, Phase 3 Heightened Alert was the same name used to refer to the return to Phase 2, despite these restrictions differing from that set of measures in one key area. Dining in at F&B outlets remained unallowed. The government said that if the COVID-19 situation remained stable, dining in groups of up to 5 would resume from 21 June. However, these plans were later tapered down after an increase in the number of community cases following 14 June's loosening. For example, dining in was now going to be allowed only in groups of up to 2 from 21 June instead of groups of up to 5 as planned previously. The original loosening of the restriction to groups of 5 was delayed to mid-July and eventually ended up happening on 12 July. After this 12 July loosening, things appeared to be looking up for Singapore's reopening, with the government hinting at plans to increase group sizes to 8, the level it was at before the start of Heightened Alert, when half the population had received 2 doses of a COVID-19 vaccine. This was estimated to happen in end July. However, the emergence of new clusters, including a cluster linked to multiple karaoke lounges and clubs which were operating illegally, forced the government to reverse course and tighten measures once more. Firstly, the allowance by the government for the karaoke lounges and clubs to temporarily operate as F&B outlets was suspended for 2 weeks due to the emergence of the cluster. In addition, the allowed dining in group size was reduced to 2 starting 19 July, unless the group dining in met a set of criteria set by the government, in which case the allowed group size would be 5. However, this criteria was confusing and complex, leading to many restaurants simply choosing not to implement the criteria and limiting the group sizes dining in their restaurants to 2 instead. This was notably the government's first attempt at implementing vaccination differentiated measures. But then, another large cluster emerged, this time linked to Jurong Fishery Port. This cluster was even more worrying to the government, as many seniors who are more prone to falling seriously ill if infected by the COVID-19 virus were affected by the wave of infection linked to the cluster. This was unlike the karaoke lounges and clubs cluster, where mainly younger people were affected. Hence, the government made the decision to tighten measures once more, with a return to the measures of Phase 2 heightened alert for a 4-week period starting 22nd July, and said that there would be a review of the measures 2 weeks after they commenced. There was, however, one key difference between this Phase 2 HA period and the previous one. Students continued going to school instead of being put into home-based learning. The results of the review were announced on the 6th of August, and they were that the Phase 2 heightened alert measures could be eased in 2 steps, with the first occurring on 10 August and the second happening on the 19th if the COVID-19 situation remained stable after the implementation of the first step. This is because the government had predicted that Singapore would hit the 70% vaccination mark by 9 August, its National Day. The first step of easing included the increase in group sizes from 2 back to 5, with dining in allowed in groups of 5 if all were vaccinated. However, different rules applied at coffee shops and hawker centres than other food and beverage outlets due to the difficulty of enforcing vaccination differentiated measures in these outlets. In these outlets, dining in was allowed in groups of 2, regardless of vaccination status, meaning these were the only places the unvaccinated could dine in at during this period. The allowed capacity for large events was also increased. And then the second step, which proceeded as planned on 19 August, eased restrictions requiring work from home and increased the allowed capacities of large events, malls and attractions, in addition to the removal of the temperature screening requirement. The implementation of this second step of easing marked the official end of Singapore's heightened alert period. During the heightened alert period, I wrote a song about the highs and lows of Singapore's fight against the COVID-19 virus up to that point. This song is titled HA, as in HA, heightened alert. I wrote it from the perspective of a villain, which was my personification of the coronavirus, trying to convince Singapore to give up hope in its fight against the virus. Well, except for the bridge. That part of the song depicts the government trying to convince the population not to listen to the villain and to continue fighting against the virus. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.
Well, I've got bad news for you. I'm coming back stronger after you helped me back earlier.